I am KS Dakshina Murthy, your host for this episode of The Federal's Worldly Wise. The world right now shares its attention between Israel's 8-month long attack on the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip and the ongoing 2-year war between Russia and Ukraine. But did you know there are at least 4 other deadly conflicts that have fallen off the radar? Yes, 4 deadly ongoing conflicts that have left thousands dead, tens of thousands displaced, vast swaths of infrastructure destroyed, and property worth billions damaged. Yes, it's all of this. The unfortunates are Yemen, Myanmar, Sudan, and Haiti. They require immediate attention and ideally a resolution. The UN Security Council, mandated to deal with such conflicts, is torn down the middle, rendering it useless. Russia and China on one side, the US, Britain, and France on the other. A lengthy conflict is risky for any country. The world will pay attention for a few weeks before it becomes the new normal. People get distracted by other events, and conflicts can get sucked into a black hole of anonymity. The irony is the people affected by the conflicts are not allowed to forget them. They are waking up to it every single day and have to necessarily deal with it. Among the 4, the conflict in Yemen is the longest, a leftover from the 2011 Arab Spring. A spontaneous people's uprising at the time was utilized by the armed Houthis to stage a violent insurrection. The Houthis belong to the Shia sect and considered close to Iran. Saudi Arabia, a Sunni leader and Yemen's neighbor, would have none of it. Saudi Arabia and its regional friend, the United Arab Emirates, launched a counterattack on the Yemeni capital Sana'a to dislodge the Houthis. Iran has backed the Houthis. The US and its Western allies are supporting the Saudis. The ensuing conflict has stretched for over 10 years now. Attempts at a peace deal have repeatedly failed. The UN has categorized Yemen a humanitarian disaster. Myanmar, formerly Burma, is engaged in a vicious internal war. Just when it seemed that Myanmar was gradually emerging from a military dictatorship into democracy, the army general staged a coup in 2021. The country slipped back into a dictatorship. Though the country had been under a similar dictatorship for several decades earlier, this time around the people refused to accede. Having tasted an appetizer of democracy under Aung San Suu Kyi's leadership, the population rose up in anger. The military tried to put it down by force, ruthlessly mowing down protesters. Many have been jailed, tortured, and killed. The nation's youngsters have joined with armed rebel groups. For the last 3 years, they have waged a grim battle with the Myanmarese military. The rebels have gained ground in large parts of the country. Many military personnel have defected to the resistance. Still, the fight is on. It has not reached the tipping point. India and China, two big neighbors, have the power to intervene and settle the fight. Yet, neither wants to burn bridges with the military. So sadly, the people have to fend for themselves with no certainty when they will emerge from the bitter fight. The third country is Sudan, which is seeing an internal conflict of gargantuan proportions since April 2023, which is for little more than a year. The clash between the Sudanese armed forces and the paramilitary rapid support forces, besides triggering political turmoil, has caused massive humanitarian emergency and shocking human rights violations. Close to 10 million or 1 crore people have been displaced from their homes. Some 80% have fled to more peaceful areas within Sudan, while the remaining have sought refuge in neighboring countries. Around 18,000 people have been killed in hundreds of violent incidents across the country. Nearly 20 million are suffering from want of essential food material, with one fourth in various degrees of starvation, documents a UN report, no less. There is no saying when and how the conflict will end, which started during the process of bringing in a multi party democracy. The Sudanese armed forces, loyal to the de facto ruler, General Abdel Fattah al Burhan, and his rival, General Mohammad Hamdan Dagalo, who heads the paramilitary rapid support forces, fell out, causing the convulsions in the capital Khartoum, which quickly spread to the western region. The country needs urgent international intervention, no less. Haiti, the fourth forgotten country that is going through a civil war, is for all practical purposes headless without a federal government. Situated close to the North American mainland, marauding gangs roam the streets, picking out anyone at random, robbing, raping, assaulting, and destroying individuals and damaging property. Around 7,000 people have been killed. Widespread insecurity prevails. There is nothing called the rule of law, and state institutions like the judiciary and the police force have simply collapsed. The gangs in March this year blocked Prime Minister Ariel Henry from entering the country after a visit abroad. He had to turn back to neighboring Puerto Rico. After twiddling his thumbs for a month, Henry eventually resigned. Civilians caught in the crossfire are at their wits' end, unable to countenance their future, security, and chances of peace ever returning. So, amidst these raging conflicts in four different parts of the world, the UN Security Council sits silent, fighting its own battles. The rest of the world expresses cursory sympathy before moving on, trying to sort out their own pressing issues. Let's face it, the fearful reality is if your country is in a crisis, however severe and violent, there is no one you can turn to.